Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's July 10th. Today we celebrate the man who established the science of botany in America. We'll also learn about the botanist who survived a plane crash in the Alaskan wilderness. It's an incredible story. We'll celebrate a presentation from 1977 that encouraged take a pill, if you will. I say take a plant to cope with everyday stress. We'll also learn about the little orchid that halted road construction in Louisiana and the British plant explorer that uncovered the orchid black market. Today's poetry features poems about summer. And we grow that garden library with a book about infusing your garden with more color. And then we'll wrap things up with an adorable story about a botanically inspired episode of an old TV show. And it was one of my favorites. But first, let's catch up on some greetings from gardeners from around the world and today's curated news. Today, I thought I'd share a little update from the Facebook community. Leo Presnell sent me a little post and wrote, I enjoyed your recent segment in your podcast about gutta percha. It was great to learn about the origin of this product and its many uses, especially the garden hose. But another interesting fact about this product is that the game of golf also owes a debt of gratitude to the gutta percha resin, as this was one of the first products that golf balls were made from back in the early to mid 1800s. And then he adds this adorable little fact. They called those gutta percha golf balls gutties. Isn't that cute? You know, another thing that I shared in the Facebook group last week has to do with a new Netflix series called The Big Flower Fight. This is a show about competitive flower sculpting, and I haven't watched it yet, but it's on my list. I really want to learn a little bit more about the types of flowers they use for this and then how they do it. Maybe get some inspiration from this show. Again, it's called The Big Flower Fight, and it's on Netflix. Then finally, I had shared some shortbread cookies that were made using edible blossoms, and that's what really made the shortbread cookies stand out. You know, I love to have shortbread cookies with coffee in the afternoon. Oh my goodness, that's my favorite thing. If I don't have homemade shortbread cookies, I usually go to a package of those pecan sandies. My dad and I both love those. But Renee M. from Colorado sent me an email and asked me if I had the recipe for these shortbread cookies. So I jumped online and I found what I think is probably the best recipe for them. It's from the website called Feed, so feedfeed.com. And the recipe was written by Lori Stern, and they're called Edible Flour Pressed Shortbread Cookies. Anyway, the cookies themselves are pretty straightforward to make. And as for the flowers, the author of this recipe, Lori, gets her flowers from her very own garden, and then she forages at friends' gardens and farms. Now, if you have no idea where to start, you can always start simply by just collecting some leaves and stems from your herb garden, or if some of them have gone to flower, they can be absolutely beautiful. Another thing you can do is just simply Google edible blossoms, and you'll probably be surprised by the variety that you have right in your own backyard. All right, that's it for today's Gardener Greetings. Now, if you'd like to participate in the Gardener Greetings segment, just send your pics, stories, birthday wishes, and so forth to me at my email, jennifer@thedailygardener.org, or you can post them right in the Facebook group for the show, and then I'll see them there, and I'll mention them on an upcoming episode. And to listen to the show while you're at home, Just ask Alexa or Google to play the latest episode of the Daily Gardener podcast. It's just that easy. Oh, and before I forget, if you have a special upcoming birthday or friend-iversary with a friend, a gardening friend, and you'd like me to mention it on a particular day, just let me know that in the email that you send me, so that way I don't miss them and miss your special day. Here's today's curated news. Well, the Audubon published an article recently that I thought was so interesting, and I keep mentioning to share it with you guys, and then other stories come up and they end up getting moved to the top of the list. But today I'm finally going to share this one with you, and the title of the post was called Migratory Birds Like Native Berries Best. I thought this research was absolutely fascinating. Here's what they discovered. Even when fruits of invasive plants are abundant, migratory songbirds seek out native berries, according to the new research. So all this food could be available, but if it's not native, they're not going to eat it. As winter approaches and the food supply dwindles, birds move south and they devour fall fruits all along the way to fuel their trip. But they don't eat just any fruit on their autumnal journey. Birds are after native berries, according to a study that was published in Biological Conservation in January. And I put a link to the study in the show notes. And even in late autumn, when fruits of invasive plants like Japanese barberry and the multiflora rose dominate the landscape, migratory songbirds traveling through New England are looking for native berries like blueberries, black cherries, and raspberries. And if you think about it, North American birds evolved right alongside North American plants for centuries. So these are the berries that their DNA recognizes, that they're familiar with. But the article points out that that's not the only reason that they choose one fruit over another. Previous research has found that native fruits are actually more nutritious than their invasive counterparts. And the ecologist Amanda Gallinat is quoted by saying, "They can't be eating fast food before they take off on really long migrations. They need something with high energy." And Amanda, by the way, is based at Utah State University, and she led this new study. Anyway, I think it's fascinating. She did great work. And it's just yet another reason to be paying attention to what is native and what is not. Now, as for me personally, I plant native and non-native plants in my garden. But I have to admit, as I learn more and more about natives, I'm tending to go more that direction. And I think many of the nurseries are as well. So something to consider. Finally, the website Sitting Spiritually shared some of their favorite gardening blogs. These were based in England, and I thought Sitting Spiritually did a great job of pulling together this list. So let me share with you some of these really wonderful garden blogs that are published across the pond. So first on the list is The Blackberry Garden. The Blackberry Garden is an award-winning blog, and it's written by an amateur and somewhat obsessed gardener, that's how she describes herself, Allison Levy. She opens the gate to her own garden, as well as inspirations and things about gardening that make her happy. She has a very nice blog. And her Instagram, as Sitting Spiritually points out, is totally worth a follow. So the next time you're on Instagram, look for Blackberry Garden, and Allison's writings and photos will pop up. Next on the list is a blog called Dig Delve, which features the writing of garden and landscape designer Dan Pearson. I love his writing. And of course, it includes stories about gardens and horticulture, plants, landscape, nature, food, and all with stunning Photography by Dan's partner. Anyway, love that website as well. It's Dig Delve. Third on the list is a website by Helen Johnstone called The Patient Gardener. And I love what Helen wrote here. She said, the title, The Patient Gardener, is quite aspirational, as I'm not a particularly patient person myself. And you will find that my posts are my own thoughts and ramblings, mainly about my garden, my trials and tribulations, as well as my triumphs. And then next is Dan Marsden's blog. It's called The Anxious Gardener. So we've had Patient Gardener, and now we're on to The Anxious Gardener. David writes about his life as a full-time working gardener, so he's a professional, in East Sussex. And he tends 2 large private gardens, and he shows them and their wildlife through the seasons. Now that's one I haven't checked out, but now I'm going to, because I love people who are actually in the field doing the work. It's pretty hard to beat their level of knowledge about plants and how they grow. Brings me right back to one of my favorite sayings, you have to grow it to know it, which is one of the reasons I love chatting with my friend Patricia Chandler Newport, because she has seen and done so many things when she's out in the field tending to all of her clients. Oh my gosh. And I have to tell you really quick too, one time we were talking about her just doing random maintenance on her clients' gardens. And she said, yep, we just call it petting the gardens. We go around and we pet all the gardens, we take care of them, do the maintenance, and then we move on. And I just thought that term was very cute. But, you know, it's just another indication of what life is like if that is your job, your job, instead of your hobby or your passion. It's very, very different. So if it's not a job and it is a passion or a hobby, as it is in my case and could be in yours, I always think there's a lot to learn from the pros. They're just exposed to so many more scenarios, and that diversity of experience gives them an expertise that those of us tending one garden over 20 years just don't have. All right, back to our list. So we've covered the Blackberry Garden, Dig Delve, the Patient Gardener, the Anxious Gardener, and then next up is Sally Nex. Her last name is spelled Nex. She's a garden writer based in Somerset. It's a beautiful part of southwest England. You'll want to check that one out. Then, of course, Mr. Plant Geek is Michael Perry. He's got over 18 years of experience in the horticultural industry, and he says, I'm here to clear the fog and help people enjoy easy gardens again. Michael loves to help people find shortcuts to gardening success, and his blog is where you're going to find uncomplicated tips. Then there's Alexandra Campbell's blog, The Middle-Sized Garden. We talked about that yesterday when I was sharing her blog post about creating a cottage garden. That was a great post. And of course, if you're wondering, do I have a middle-sized garden? Well, according to Alexandra, if your garden is bigger than a courtyard but smaller than an acre, then you have a middle-sized garden. Finally, Caleb Melchor is over at The Curious Gardener. He describes himself as a plant geek, a writer, and a designer. And he says, I believe in presence, being close, and paying attention. Well, this is a great list of websites from across the pond. If you're looking for this list, this particular post by Sitting Spiritually, they do a much better job than I just did of going into more detail with each one of these blogs. You'll have the complete list. You can click on each of the links and check it out. But all you have to do is go to the Facebook group for the show, the Daily Gardener Community, and type in the word blog, and this post will pop up, and then you can just use all the links and have a fun afternoon exploring all of the different websites that are available from England. And you just might meet a new friend in the process. Garden bloggers are super friendly people. Now, before I close out this curated news segment for today, I wanted to share a chore that was actually posted in the South Bend Tribune out of South Bend, Indiana, on this day in 1952. And it caught my attention because it has to do with planting your shade trees in your garden wisely. Here's what it said. Don't plant your shade tree so that it shades your neighbor's yard instead of your own. It's a great piece of advice. You know, back in Maple Grove, that's exactly what's happened. My neighbor's tree shades my garden and shades my house. And every day I just thank God for that tree. But I feel bad for them because they don't really get the benefit of it. Now, this article points out, if you set a tree on the eastern border of your property, it's going to shade your neighbor's yard instead of your own garden during the hottest part of the day, in the afternoon. It's exactly what's happening at my garden back in Maple Grove. So consider your plantings as a permanent investment in beauty and comfort that is worth real thought. Yes, we have to be strategic when we plant our trees or even our shrubs. You know, I'm planting 3 large shrubs that are going to be over 12 feet tall this week here at the cabin. And I must have been moving them all around the property. I don't know. I've probably switched spots up 10, 15, 20 times. And I know that my neighbor next door is looking at it going, "What are you doing over there, woman?" But it's just that I want to be very deliberate about where I put these things because I only have one chance to do it right. And I want to make sure that I do it right. So whether you're planting a shrub or a tree, these are long-term investments, and placement is everything. It's just like with real estate, location, location, location. So don't be so quick to get them in the ground. Get a kiddie swimming pool. Let them hang out in that while the weather's really hot as you decide what's the right spot. Where is truly the best spot for this on my property? You just might be surprised what happens if you can give yourself a little bit of breathing room and a little bit of time to think about where you want your plants. All right, that's it for today's gardening news. Now, if you'd like to check out my curated news articles and blog posts for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. So if you're looking for the one about the English blogs, just search for the word blog in the search bar and this post will pop up. And if you're looking for the one about the migratory birds preferring native berries, just search for the word birds and that post from the Audubon will pop up. In any case, the best part about being in the Facebook group is that you don't have to take notes or search for links. You just join the group. You look for the Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and then just request to join. And you know, one other sad fact about living during this pandemic is that it's very difficult to meet people face to face and make a new friend. So I find I've been making most of my new friends online lately. And the Daily Gardener Community could be that place for you. And we all know that gardeners make the best friends, and at least you have something in common to talk about. So I hope to see you in the group. Here's today's brevities. On this day, the botanist Asa Gray resigned from the Wilkes expedition, and the date was 1838. Gray was frustrated by all of the delays. He was a person of action. He was a very deliberate person, and he also disliked Captain Charles Wilkes. Gray disagreed with Wilkes about the Latin descriptions of the new taxa, and he also disagreed with Wilkes' staffing rules. Wilkes wanted to work with Americans only, but Gray knew that the work of the expedition would suffer without the help of European experts. So Gray decided to pivot and he left the expedition to accept a position at the University of Michigan. But before he could officially start that job, Harvard wooed him away. At Harvard, Gray established the science of botany in America, and he guided the country into the international botany arena and made it competitive. And that was due in large part to all of the great relationships that he'd established with European botanists. And he was also very good friends with Charles Darwin. And so it's no surprise that it was Asa Gray who said, "Natural selection is not the wind which propels the vessel, but the rudder which, by friction, now on this side and now on that, shapes the course." Asa Gray. And on this day in 1949, a 79-year-old botanist, Dr. Melvin Thurston Cook, love that name, and his wife and their pilot were rescued by an Air Force helicopter after spending a week in the Alaskan wilderness. I'll have to ask my parents what they think about that, because I think they spent just a couple of hours in the Alaskan wilderness and they were ready to come home. Melvin Thurston Cook reported after the ordeal that they had survived on 90 dozen eggs after their plane was forced down in the rugged Brooks mountain range. As luck would have it, 1,080 eggs were aboard the plane as cargo. Now, I don't know how they kept those eggs safe to eat, but they did. Cook shared their ingenuity with the world in newspaper articles, saying that they had not lacked for variety in their preparation of the eggs. They enjoyed fried eggs, boiled eggs, poached eggs, scrambled eggs, shirred eggs, and omelet. And naturally, when he wasn't eating eggs, Dr. Cook was out collecting specimens. Now, after they were rescued on this day in 1949, Dr. Cook was gearing up for his 80th birthday in September. And because of that, he and his wife had decided to go on that vacation in Alaska. The newspaper accounts said that Melville never doubted that the party would be saved, but the crash ultimately impacted their priorities. Sounds a little bit like the pandemic, because following the accident, Cook and his wife moved to be closer to their children. And as a result, one of their 4 kids decided to follow in Cook's footsteps and then became a plant pathologist, Dr. Harold T. Cook. Before the accident, Cook was finishing up his career by working as a visiting part-time professor of plant pathology at Louisiana State University. But during his prime, Melville had gone botanizing with Nathaniel Lord Britton and Elizabeth Gertrude Britton in Puerto Rico. What an experience. And he had also worked with Henry Allen Gleason at the New York Botanical Garden. Rubbing shoulders with botanical giants. And on this day in 1977, Ethan Allen and Elvin McDonald of House Beautiful gave an inspiring presentation called Decorating with Plants. Now, bear in mind, this was 1977. McDonald revealed many new decorating with plant ideas. Keep in mind, this was 3 decades before Instagram and what we now call plant styling. Otherwise, McDonald would probably have had no problem sharing pictures of the over 300 plants that were in his apartment. He would fit right in this modern era. And in the newspaper promotions for his presentation, McDonald was quoted as saying this: "Take a pill, if you will. I say, take a plant to cope with everyday stress." Isn't that fantastic? Take a plant. And on this day in 1983, the newspaper headline in the Town Talk of Alexandria, Louisiana said, "Rare plant halts roadwork." It turns out a $15 million highway widening project near College Station had come to a standstill because it threatened a tiny, rare, and unusual orchid plant, the Spiranthes parksii, also known as the Navasota ladies' tresses, because it grew along the Navasota River. It's only 6 inches tall, and it had white blooms. The Navasota ladies' tresses were first discovered in 1945 and described by Donovan Stewart Carell in his 1950 book, Native Orchids of North America, North of Mexico. The Spiranthes parksii became the 54th United States plant species to be classified as endangered. And finally, it was on this day in 1988 that the British plant explorer Roy Lancaster revealed that a thriving black market for plants was threatening rare Chinese orchids. In the same way an art collector might buy stolen works of art underground, elite plant collectors are the wealthy clients of orchid smugglers. Lancaster shared the plight of Paphiopedilum arminiacum, commonly known as the golden slipper orchid, a rare orchid which was discovered in 1980 but was 100% harvested from the world in 1983. In just 3 short years, the golden slipper orchid had gone from discovery to presumed extinction. In unearthed words, here are some poems about summer. This first one's from Francis Thompson, the English poet, from A Carimbus for Autumn. The summer looks out from her brazen tower through the flashing bars of July. This one's called Summer, and it's by the American poet Mary Oliver. Leaving the house, I went out to see the frog, for example, in her satiny skin, and her eggs like a slippery veil, and her eyes with their golden rims, and the pond with its risen lilies and its warmed shores, and the long, windless afternoons, like a dropped cloud, taking one slow step, then standing a while, then taking another, writing her own soft-footed poem through the still waters. And here's a poem from Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, who was an English poet and politician. It's called Sonnet 7. Summer is come, for every spray now sings. The hart hath hung his old head on the pail. The buck in brake his winter coat he flings. The fishes fleet with new repaired scale. The adder all her slow away she slings. The swift swallow pursueth the flies small. The busy bee her honey now she mings. Winter is worn, that was the flower's bale. And thus I see among these pleasant things each care decays, and yet my sorrow springs. Ugh, to be sad in the summer. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Flower-Powered Garden by Andy Vernon. It's hard to believe, but this book came out already in 2018, and the subtitle is Supercharge Your Borders and Containers with Bold, Colorful Plant Combinations. The author, Sarah Raven, said, "It's full of good tips, growing and design guides, and an invaluable zippy-zappy plant encyclopedia. Andy Vernon's new book will help you plot your own flower-powered collections to make your garden glow. Andy Vernon is an award-winning garden writer, photographer, and horticultural consultant. This book is 300 pages of illustrated ideas to improve and redo beds, advice on caring for plants, 15 incredible color schemes, and plant picks to help you create a garden bursting with color. You can get a copy of The Flower-Powered Garden by Andy Vernon and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $5. Now that's a deal. Love that book. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 1966, the New York Daily News shared the TV listing for 9 p.m. It was a repeat episode of Bewitched, starring Elizabeth Montgomery and Dick York. In the episode, rare black Peruvian roses rob Samantha of her witching powers and gave her little green square spots on her face. Aunt Clara remembers that the Peruvian black rose was used to drive witches out of Peru. So she sends Darren off, or Durwood, to go gather items for the antidote, and then she brewed them all together. She needed bat wings, porpoise milk, the eye of newt, of course, and an ostrich feather. Luckily for Samantha, Aunt Clara said that you could only get Peruvian black rose sickness once. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Wyoming, Minnesota with the help of Paige Mance, Brooke Bierbaum, Kiana Rayleigh, Maddie Doyle, Natalie Decker, and Eric Begay. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media. You can follow the show on Instagram, and listeners always have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. All the stories and books that are featured on the show can be found over at thedailygardener.org, thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. Last but not least, you can share your own gardener greetings on the show by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow. Paphiopedilum arminiacum. Oh my gosh, now I've got to go look that up. One moment. Paphiopedilum. Lancaster shared the plight of Paphiopedilum armeniacum